Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about weighing the cost of putting up your food, especially in the form of dehydrating. Because I recently had this question where somebody was kind of doing a rough idea of, well, how much is it going to cost for the equipment to dehydrate and the cost of electricity to dehydrate specific items when I can just go down to the store and buy that? And these are very, very valid questions, but sometimes people forget certain aspects as to why people would want to dehydrate or even can their food and put it up. So first I'm going to throw out a few questions for you to consider and just kind of, ask yourself these questions and think about what your answer would be. And then also to bring about some pointers that you may not have thought about when it comes to this. So the first thing is, do you have a garden or farm animals? So do you have chickens that are producing eggs and you're getting more eggs than you can consume in that period of time? Do you have dairy animals and they give you far more milk than you can use during that, and are they constantly giving you far more milk than you can use? Or do you have a garden where you're getting all kinds of produce and you're eating what you can, but you just can't work through all that produce in a single season? So these are things you got to consider. What are you going to do with all that excess? I mean, you might be able to give it away, you might be able to sell it, but then the other question is, what are your thoughts on putting up things for hard times when maybe something happens to your farm animals or chickens, or they're just not laying or giving you milk, or it's off season and you don't have a garden coming in? Is it not going to be then important for you to put up what you can to get you through those particular times during the year? And then as far as dehydrating goes in particular, are you limited in space for food storage? So if you answered yes to having a garden and farm animals that give you milk and eggs, or even meat, to wanting to put up for hard times and being limited in space, if you have answered yes to any of those, then dehydrating is something I highly recommend because it takes up so little space, it's easy to do, and it really doesn't have to cost as much money as you may think, because you may be looking at me having a couple of electric dehydrators that I use. But there's other factors you may not consider. That I also have a way of dehydrating food that doesn't take any electricity, and that is when I use my wood stove to dehydrate and the racks that Patrick built for me. Maybe you don't have a wood stove and you don't have a husband that's built you this nice rack to dehydrate on, but maybe you don't realize that there's many ways to dehydrate foods, to dry your foods that don't require any electricity or any fancy equipment, or even a wood stove. One that would take electricity but no extra fancy equipment would be simply using your oven. This is going to be a very valid method for most of your foods. It's not one I recommend for delicate things like herbs, but it can work quite well for dehydrating meats and fruits and vegetables. And then if you have silicone trays, then you can use your oven for dehydrating liquids like broth, eggs, and milk. And then there's the non-electric ways that you can dehydrate things. And I actually go over quite a number of ways in a video I did a few years ago that I'll link to in the description box down below, called Various Methods of Drying Your Foods. If you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going to suit my budget, what can I do, then please go check out that link to get a few more ideas. But even if you decide to go with an electric method, getting an electric dehydrator. So you've got the upfront cost of buying the electric dehydrator, and then maybe buying the silicone tray so you can do liquid items or any item like a cream cheese or yogurt where you're going to want to spread it on a silicone tray. But for those, you can actually just use parchment paper, though you can only have so many uses with parchment paper before you have to throw it out. So this is why I do recommend silicone, but it's still cheaper to start with parchment paper. And then you don't have solar power like we do, so you're having to run it off your electricity, and that's going to cost a certain amount per month. And you're weighing all this out and you're like, well, wow, when I can go to the store and buy a dozen eggs for $3, $5, $6, whatever they are now. I mean, I've seen them as much as $6 here locally. But if I was to go buy those $6 a dozen eggs and then dehydrate them so I have them on hand, well, then once I add all the cost of all the equipment and the electricity it takes, wow, I'm paying like twice as much for those eggs. Well, maybe in the beginning you are, for one, but here's what yet another thing to ask yourself. How much are those eggs, those dehydrated eggs, going to be worth to you if maybe 2, 3, 10 years from now, you don't have access to eggs, or the eggs in the store have gone up to 3, 4 times as much as they were when you were first considering this and doing the math. Well, if you already had these eggs put up, well, then in the long run, you've actually saved money, or you have that stuff there when maybe some kind of catastrophe happens, even if it's just to you in your own situation, and you can't go down to the store and buy eggs. Well, because you actually put eggs up for yourself, well, now you have eggs that you can use even in a hard financial situation. Because, maybe somebody lost their job. Maybe there was a major catastrophe that happened within the family, and you don't have any extra funds to put into going to the store and buying eggs. Well, you've got eggs on hand because you made that investment into the proper equipment and the time and the electricity to put them up. So these are all the things that you have to weigh out. And then, of course, coming back to having your own garden and farm animals, well, you already got this food coming in. Being able to dehydrate your food in some form, all the excess that's coming in and putting it up, that's another way that you're preparing yourself for hard times, or even just for the winter when your garden is not growing and your chickens aren't laying because they're not getting enough sun, or whatever it is. And personally, I don't believe in forcing chickens to lay through the winter by putting light in their coop. I believe there's a reason why they have that break. I mean, think about it, ladies. Would you want to be pregnant all the time for your whole life? No. This is just me. Now, some people will do that. That's got to be up to you. But I would much rather take those excess eggs and put them up so I have them to work through during the winter. Some people do use other methods like the water glass or lime water method and all that, but those methods take up so much more space in your storage. So to me, dehydrating just makes so much sense because I can fit almost 3 dozen eggs into a single quart jar, where that same 3 dozen eggs would take up a lot more room putting it in a big jar with water and the lime and then, having it sit in there. And even then, those eggs are only going to be they're only going to last 6 months to a year, depending on the eggs, depending on where they're stored, where your dehydrated eggs can last vacuum sealed years and years. So, and I'm just using eggs for an example because somebody had contacted me asking specifically about the eggs, but apply that to whatever it is. It's just like buying dehydrated, milk powder. People look at that and go, wow, I could go down to the store and buy fresh milk for a lot less than it's going to cost me to have dehydrated milk on hand, right? Milk powder. So even if you're buying these products, well, again, here's the question. What if you can't get that fresh milk? Maybe you don't have farm animals. Maybe there's been some kind of, your roads on each side. There was a major blizzard and the trucks couldn't get through, like's happened here, to restock the stores, and the milk's all gone because that's the first thing that happened is everybody within 24 hours, everybody went down to the store and cleaned all the milk out. And so now you have none. Isn't it then worth it, that extra cost that you paid to have that milk powder and have it on hand and ready to use? Obviously, it's going to be worth it for the sake of yourself and for your family. And that applies to any of the foods that you're thinking about putting up. And it may be different. It might be worth it to have a dehydrator for this particular thing over here, but not for doing this particular thing over here. Like for me, it's not worth it for me to dehydrate milk. I'm better off stocking up on milk powder and then using fresh milk as much as I can than it is to dehydrate milk, just because of the cost of milk to us anyway. It's just not worth it. for me to do that. So, those are the other things you got to consider when you're figuring out what's going to be best expense-wise. I have dehydrated milk just to show it can be done, but since I don't have dairy animals and the cost of a good organic milk here is very expensive, then I'm already having to pay for that milk, that high price for that milk, then to put more cost into dehydrating it and time and all that, not worth it. It's far more worth it for me to buy a good whole organic milk powder from Azure Standard than it is for me to dehydrate the milk myself. So you have to weigh out the cost for yourself, but then also realize, just like with this electric equipment out there, I mean, I love the Cosori. The Cosori is more expensive than the Nesco, but not near as expensive as the Excalibur. And personally, the way the Cosori is set up, I like it better than the Excalibur. You got to find out what's going to fit into your pocketbook, or can you simply just buy yourself some kind of cooling racks that might only cost $10 to $20 and use those in your oven for putting your things on and drying, or a cookie sheet in your oven, or whatever heat source you have for your home, setting those things in front of that heat source so they can dry. Any place that has airflow and some sort of heat is going to dry your foods. And it does not have to cost an arm and a leg, but in the long run, you're going to be really glad you have that food on hand. So figure out what suits you best for your pocketbook, your space, and what you are able to do. Then, weigh out that whole cost and then decide for yourself, is it worth it? I know for me, it's 100% worth it. Even if I had to do all of my dehydrating using electricity, where it's going to cost so much per month or so much more to put these same foods up that I already paid X amount of dollars for. Now I'm going to pay even more money in electricity and canning jars and whatever it is I'm storing them in to put back in my pantry. Yep, it's 100% worth it. Whether I can dry them for free with my wood stove because I already have a fire going, or using my solar power, or using our public power. It's worth it no matter which way I go with it, to me. That's me personally. So anyway, I hope this just gave you a little bit of food for thought on that, so you can kind of weigh it out and consider for yourself all these different factors that you got to take in. If you don't care about putting up for hard times, it may not be worth it to you. If you don't have a garden and you don't have farm animals, it may not be worth it to you. And if you think that the stores are always going to have what you need all of the time, it may not be worth it to you. But just remember, anything can happen at any time that might make some of these foods unavailable to you, whether it be a major catastrophe that hits you or something that prevents the stores from having the foods that you need. So anyway, please share any of your thoughts or ideas down below. Is it worth it to you, and why? So people can read your comments and learn a little bit more from you as well as they weigh out these different expenses. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.